Yes, look, one of the things about prison is that it's almost, to me it felt almost like a near-death experience where you get the opportunity to look back at your life in the way that a lot of people who go through a near-death experience, who have a major car accident or a terminal illness or something, often go through. But I've been able to do it without having the unfortunate concern about coming close to dying. And you really look at the things that are important in your life. You get a sense of the people that are important, the things that you've done, and so on. And so coming out here, it really does feel like almost like a rebirth.
And it must be strange being the subject of the story rather than reporting the story.
Yeah, that's a little bit weird. I feel a bit uncomfortable about that, but I've also come to realise that in the time that we're in prison, over the 400 days, the whole question of freedom of the press became a very central issue, not just in terms of our experience, but right across the world. Journalists were being murdered by ISIL. We've seen draconian measures by a number of governments around the world trying to limit the scope of press freedom, the press operations. We've seen the Charlie Hebdo attack, of course, and the recent attack in Denmark. And so the whole question of freedom of speech became a very pertinent issue. We were in prison as a part of that narrative, and I think a lot of people have identified us with that, and so we've come to symbolise something that was much bigger than just the three of us alone.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment, but I suppose looking at this chronologically and looking at your time in prison, how did you cope with all of that, physically and mentally?
One of the things I realised fairly quickly was that, at the risk of running a cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I saw a lot of people in prison who I felt were quite broken by the experience. When you're in prison, you lose control over almost every aspect of your life. What they can't take away is your physical self. Now, we weren't under physical pressure. We were never physically threatened. And so we still had that ability to look after ourselves. And I realised that you needed to make a very conscious, very deliberate effort to stay fit, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so I spent a lot of time exercising, running up and down. There was a corridor of about 30 or 40 metres long that was just outside our cell door, and I'd pound up and down that for almost an hour a day, running at least 8 or 10 kilometres. We had an exercise regime that we'd go through. I started a master's degree in international relations when the prison authorities finally allowed a university, Griffith University in Australia, to send through the materials, and that gave me a degree of mental discipline and intellectual rigour. And I also spent some time meditating just to try and keep my head in a solid, rational space.
And of course that huge international campaign to win your freedom, that must have helped you to stay positive, mustn't it?
Yeah, and as I said, and not just stay positive, it gave us enormous strength, but it also gave us a reason for being there. We could have seen this a number of ways as an attack on the work that we had done individually, and the charges were very specifically directed at us as individuals. Or we could have seen it as something, a part of a much bigger campaign, and that's what the international support really helped us with. We saw that we were representative of something much bigger, that it wasn't just about us, and that we were fighting for a very significant cause.
And you must constantly be thinking about your two colleagues, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're out on bail at the moment, which is a positive sign, and of course I'm here, I'm on release under a presidential order. But the trial is ongoing. The next hearing is on Monday. We are very confident, of course. We know that we're innocent. All of the rest of the world pretty much seems to understand that and accept that. The first trial didn't go our way. We're very concerned, obviously, that the retrial will go the same way. But I think that as long as justice is done, as long as the evidence is presented as it should be, then I think there is a very, very good chance that they'll be out. We just might have to see this process through for quite a little while longer, but we just can't take anything for granted.